The biting Chicago wind whipped around Alara Vance as she juggled a lukewarm coffee and her son's tiny hand, her gaze drifting towards the gleaming monolith of the Sterling Collection on Michigan Avenue. The gallery, a titan in the contemporary art world, occupied 3 floors of a historic skyscraper, its polished brass signage a beacon of cultural and financial power. It was a world away from her small, paint-splattered apartment in the vibrant, gritty neighborhood of Pilsen. "Mama, look what I made." Leo, her bright-eyed 6-year-old, tugged at her coat, thrusting a crayon drawing towards her. It depicted a stoic-looking pigeon perched on a fire escape, its feathers rendered with an almost architectural precision, its single visible eye imbued with a surprisingly world-weary expression. "That's incredible, sweet pea," Alara managed, her voice a little rough from the early morning chill. "He looks like he's seen a few Chicago winters." "He told me he misses the sunshine," Leo said, his brow furrowed with earnest concern. Alara marveled, not for the first time, at his innate ability to perceive and translate emotion. It was a talent she recognized, a ghost of her own younger self. Now, her artistic sensibilities were channeled into teaching after-school art classes at the Lakeside Arts Initiative, a community center struggling to keep its doors open. Her own canvases, bold, abstract interpretations of urban life and hauntingly expressive portraits, adorned the walls of their modest apartment and occasionally found homes in local coffee shops and independent bookstores, earning her a trickle of income and quiet recognition. It was a universe away from the gilded cage her parents, Arthur and Beatrice Sterling, had envisioned for her. "All right, Mr. Artist, breakfast first, then we head to the initiative," Alara said, steering him towards their building. "Ms. Anya is bringing in some amazing recycled materials for a sculpture project today. Can I make a robot?" Leo's eyes lit up. "You can make whatever your imagination dreams up," Alara promised, a familiar ache tightening her chest. Imagination, the very thing Arthur and Beatrice had systematically tried to expunge from her, deeming it an impractical indulgence. They, the arbiters of artistic taste in Chicago, viewed art primarily as an asset class, a marker of social standing. Arthur, a man whose pronouncements carried the weight of generational wealth and whose demeanor was as unyielding as the city's winter. Beatrice, his wife, was a doyen of Chicago's philanthropic scene, her warmth a carefully curated veneer over a will of tempered steel. And then there was Genevieve, Alara's older sister, the perfect scion. An MBA from Kellogg, now second in command at the Sterling Collection, Jen was everything Alara was not: polished, pragmatic, and perfectly aligned with their parents' ambitions. As Alara helped Leo with his jacket, her eyes flickered to the window. A sleek black town car, the kind her father favored, glided past. A tremor of old anxieties. This weekend, the Sterling Collection was unveiling a major retrospective of a controversial European sculptor. She remembered the frantic energy of such openings from her youth, a time when her own artistic flair had been a source of private joy and public dismissal. A delightful hobby, Alara, Beatrice would coo, but one must secure a future, dear. A Sterling woman has responsibilities. The memory of herself at 17, breathless and terrified, staring at the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in a cramped high school bathroom stall, was still vivid. It had taken 3 tests before the reality sunk in. Weeks of agonizing silence before she'd found the courage to tell them. The fallout had been nuclear. "Mama, we're gonna be late." Leo's voice, insistent and grounding, pulled her back. "Right you are, my little timekeeper." Alara forced a smile, took a deep breath, and squared her shoulders. The past was a locked room. Her focus was Leo, always Leo. As they navigated the bustling sidewalks towards the blue line, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but a strange premonition made her answer. "Alara?" It's Genevieve's voice, usually so assured, sounded strained. Alara stopped dead, oblivious to the rush of commuters around her. Jen? What is it? Is something wrong? I need to talk to you. In person. Can we meet? Silence stretched, filled only by the rumble of a passing L train. Leo squeezed her hand, his small face etched with concern. All right, Ilara heard herself say. When? Tomorrow? If that's feasible for your schedule? Her gaze drifted towards the distant gleam of the sterling collection. Yes, tomorrow. A pause. Thank you, Ilara. The call ended. Ilara's carefully constructed equilibrium felt like it was teetering on the edge of a precipice. One phone call and 5 years of painstaking self-reliance felt fragile. She clutched Leo's hand tighter and moved forward. 17. The bathroom stall at Whitney M. Young Magnet High School. Ilara's hands trembled as she stared at the third positive pregnancy test. The Sterling family's Lincoln Park brownstone, a monument to old money and impeccable taste, felt like a mausoleum as she walked in later that afternoon. You're late, Ilara. Beatrice's voice, cool and precise, echoed from the formal living room. Arthur was engrossed in the Wall Street Journal. Genevieve, then a precocious 14-year-old, was hunched over a calculus textbook. A tableau of sterling perfection. Art Club ran over, she mumbled, the lie tasting like ash. Dinner is being kept warm. Wash up. Ilara dropped her backpack. I need to tell you something. Her voice was a reed in the wind. What is it, dear? Beatrice asked, not looking up from a charity gala seating chart. It's important. That got their attention. Arthur lowered his paper. Well, he prompted, his brow furrowing. A failing grade, I presume? The words caught in her throat. No. I'm pregnant. The air crackled. Shock, disbelief, then a glacial fury settled on her parents' faces. What? Did you say? Arthur's voice was dangerously soft. I'm pregnant, she repeated, voice trembling. About 3 months. It's Marcus's. Marcus Thorne. Beatrice's perfectly sculpted lips curled. That scholarship boy from the art department? Arthur exploded. You are no daughter of mine, he roared, the sound reverberating off the coffered ceilings. To bring this disgrace upon us. To defile the sterling name. Dad, please. Out! Beatrice shrieked, her composure shattering. You've shamed us. Do you have any idea the scandal this will cause? Ilara looked at Genevieve, who stared back, wide-eyed with a mixture of fear and confusion, but silent. I'm keeping the baby, Ilara whispered, hands protectively on her stomach. Marcus and I. Marcus Thorne. Arthur sneered. You think that charity case will stand by you? His family barely scrapes by. What can they possibly offer? He's a brilliant photographer. Ilara cried. Professors say he has a real future. Enough about that gutter snipe. Beatrice cut her off. You will terminate this. I'll arrange it. No. Arthur's face was crimson. Then get out. And don't ever come back. If you choose this stain, you are no longer a sterling. Beatrice pointed to the grand staircase. Pack a bag. You have 30 minutes. You will live with the consequences of your choices. Upstairs, tears streaming, Ilara threw clothes and a few cherished art supplies into a duffel. Genevieve crept in. Ellie. It's okay, Jenny. Ilara tried a watery smile. Where will you go? I don't know. But I'll figure it out. Take this. Jen pressed a wad of bills into her hand, nearly $500, her entire savings. I love you. Downstairs, her parents offered only icy silence. The heavy oak door of the sterling brownstone slammed shut behind her, the sound a definitive end. The Chicago night air was frigid. Marcus's response, when she finally reached him from a payphone, was a fresh stab of betrayal. Ellie, I can't. I just got the acceptance letter from SAIC, full scholarship. This wasn't supposed to happen. I can't throw my future away. His voice was more relieved than regretful. Alone, pregnant, disowned, and abandoned, She found herself the next morning, exhausted and numb, outside the art room at school. Alara. Good heavens, child, what's happened? Miss Evelyn Hayes, her compassionate art teacher, rushed towards her. Alara collapsed into her arms, the story tumbling out. You'll come home with me, Miss Hayes declared. You're not alone. We'll figure this out. And they had. Leo, time to pack up your masterpieces, Alara called, 5 years later, as dusk painted the studio in hues of lavender and rose. Leo, diligently sketching the city's skyline from the window, his tongue poking out in concentration, was her world. With Miss Hayes's unwavering support, Alara had finished high school, earned a certificate in art education from a city college, and was now making a life, however modest, for herself and her son. Mama, look. It's us at Millennium Park looking at the bean. Leo held up his sketch. The perspective, the way he'd captured the distorted reflections in the iconic sculpture, the subtle joy in their stick figure forms it was breathtaking. Oh, Leo, this is truly special, she said, hugging him tight. His talent was undeniable, a legacy from her, yes, but also from Marcus. She'd heard whispers he was making a name for himself in commercial photography in New York, but she'd never tried to find him. Did he even know he had a son? Pizza tonight, she offered, trying to shake off the melancholy. Extra olives, just for you? Yay! The call from Genevieve had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She'd barely slept, replaying scenarios in her mind. The next morning, she'd texted back, The Bean and Brew, Dearborn Street, 3 p.m. The meeting felt surreal. Genevieve, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, looked every inch the sterling heiress, though her eyes held an uncharacteristic anxiety. Ellie. A hesitant, awkward hug. You look, well. Surviving, Alara replied, a touch of defiance in her tone. After stilted pleasantries, Jen got to the point. I'm getting married next month. To William Davenport. The Davenports were old Chicago money, a dynasty in manufacturing. Congratulations, General, that's wonderful. I want you at the wedding, Ellie. And Leo, of course. I want to meet my nephew. Then, the bombshell, Dad. Dad hasn't been well. His heart. The doctors want him to slow down. Alara felt a confusing mix of old resentment and a flicker of filial concern. And, Jen added, looking uncomfortable, the Davenports are traditional. They expect the whole family. So, this is about appearances? Alara's voice was sharper than she intended. No. Yes. Partly. But mostly, I want you there. You're my sister. As they parted, Jen handed her 2 envelopes. One was a lavish wedding invitation. The other, heavier, was unsealed. From Mother and Father. Later, after Leo was asleep, Alara opened it. A cashier's check for $50,000. And a curt note. Alara, this is an initial disbursement from your trust. We can discuss further arrangements. Arthur Sterling. She stared at the sum, more money than she'd earned in the last 3 years combined. The next morning, she texted Jen, We'll be there. 3 days later, her doorbell rang. Arthur and Beatrice Sterling stood on her threshold. Arthur looked grayer, frilier. Beatrice's elegance was intact, but her eyes seemed shadowed. Alara. Arthur's voice lacked its old authority. Come in, she said, her own voice surprisingly steady. Leo was on the floor, surrounded by art supplies, meticulously drawing a fantastical cityscape with impossible, Escher-like buildings. He looked up, curious. Leo, these are your grandfather and grandmother. Arthur and Beatrice froze, their eyes fixed on Leo's drawing. The detail, the imaginative scope, the sheer audacity of the composition, it was undeniably, shockingly brilliant. Arthur slowly picked it up, his hand trembling. Beatrice gasped. Their faces were a maelstrom of emotions, surprise, awe, and something akin to recognition? Or was it regret? Arthur finally looked at Alara, speechless. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was a dizzying spectacle of crystal, orchids, and Chicago's elite. Alara, in a simple but elegant navy dress she'd found on sale, felt like an alien. Alara, you made it. Jen, radiant in couture, rushed to embrace her. And this must be Leo. Hello, handsome. I'm your Aunt Jen. Leo, usually boisterous, was momentarily shy but managed a polite congratulations. Your dress is very sparkly. Arthur and Beatrice approached, the reunion still new and fragile. Alara, we're glad you came. Arthur's greeting was stiff but not unkind. Beatrice offered a tentative smile to Leo. The ceremony was opulent. During the reception, Leo, growing restless, found a quiet corner and started sketching. Soon, a distinguished older gentleman peered over his shoulder. My word, astonishing. It was Julian Croft, William Davenport's uncle, a renowned art critic and historian. Whose child is this prodigy? Alara hurried over. He's my son, Leo Vance. Vance? And you are? Alara Vance. Formerly Sterling. Sterling. Croft's eyes lit up. Arthur and Beatrice's daughter? The artistic talent clearly runs deep. It reminds me of Arthur's early work, before he took over the gallery. Father's work. Alara was stunned. But of course, Croft exclaimed. Arthur Sterling was one of the most promising cityscape painters of his generation. His Nocturnes in Steel and Glass series was groundbreaking. A great loss to the art world when he put down his brushes for business. A hush fell. All eyes turned to Arthur, who looked profoundly uncomfortable. I didn't know, Alara whispered. You paint, don't you, my dear? Croft pressed. I've heard whispers. Why not at the Sterling collection? That's enough, Julian, Arthur interjected, his voice tight. No, Alara said, turning to her father. You were a painter? You understood this, and you still told me my passion was a folly. The silence was deafening. Arthur sighed, a heavy, weary sound. I was passionate, yes. But I learned the hard way that passion doesn't always pay the bills. I wanted a more secure path for you. So you crushed mine? Alara's voice was quiet, laden with years of pain. Whispers rippled through the guests. The missing Sterling daughter. The boy is clearly gifted. Wasn't there some scandal? Alara took Leo's hand, ready to flee. But Genevieve, resplendent in her wedding gown, stepped forward, taking the microphone. Today is about family, she announced, her voice clear and strong. And I am overjoyed that my sister, Alara, and my nephew, Leo, are here to share it. They are Sterlings. They are loved. Applause, hesitant at first, then warmer, filled the ballroom. Later, Arthur approached Alara. We were wrong, he said, his voice low. Profoundly wrong. I am sorry. Beatrice, beside him, nodded, her eyes on Leo. We would like a chance, Alara, to make amends, to be grandparents. Alara looked at them, then at Leo, whose eyes were wide with the day's events. Apologies are easy, she said, her voice even. Actions speak louder. Leo deserves to choose his own path, to have his talents nurtured, not dismissed. If you can truly accept that, then perhaps we can find a way forward. Christmas morning, 6 months later. Snow-blanketed Pilsen. More presents than ever lay under their small, cheerfully decorated tree, several bearing elegant tags from Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Beatrice. Is Grandpa coming to see my new train set? Leo asked, his face alight. He is, sweet pea. At 10. The thaw had been slow, tentative. Arthur had started visiting, ostensibly to see Leo, but Alara noticed him lingering over her own canvases, a wistful look in his eyes. He'd even started sketching with Leo, their styles clashing and complementing. Beatrice, shedding some of her formidable reserve, took Leo on outings to the Lincoln Park Zoo and the Field Museum. The Sterling Collection had recently announced a new, emerging Chicago artists wing, a project spearheaded by Arthur himself. Alara's students from the Lakeside Arts Initiative were slated for the inaugural show. The doorbell chimed. Arthur and Beatrice stood there, laden with more gifts, their smiles genuine. Later that afternoon, another ring. Alara opened the door to a ghost. Marcus Thorne. Older, a little weathered, but unmistakably him. Alara. It's been a long time. He'd seen an article about the emerging artists show that mentioned Leo's prodigious talent and, through some journalistic digging, connected him to Alara. You can't be here, Marcus, she said, her voice calm but firm. 5 years. Not a call, not a send of support. What do you want? He's my son. I have rights. Marcus's voice rose. Arthur Sterling materialized beside Alara, his presence suddenly as imposing as the skyscrapers that bore his family's mark. Mr. Thorne, Arthur's voice was glacial. You have no claim here. Not legally, and certainly not morally. Disparage my family, or attempt to exploit my grandson, and I will ensure every gallery, every collector, every art student in this city knows the full story of your character, including your penchant for abandoning pregnant minors and, I hear, your rather significant child support arrears in 3 different states. Marcus blanched and, after a sputtering attempt at a retort, retreated. He was later sued by another young woman and faced significant legal and financial repercussions. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Alara sat with her parents in the quiet living room, the city lights twinkling outside. I haven't forgotten, she said softly. But I'm willing to try. For Leo. And maybe, for us. Arthur reached for Beatrice's hand. So are we, Alara. So are we. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Chicago in a soft, hopeful silence. The fractures remained, deep and complex, but for the first time in years, Alara felt a sliver of light penetrating the cracks. Perhaps, just perhaps, the Chicago winter was finally beginning to thaw. The new year unfurled with a cautious optimism that Alara hadn't felt in years. The biting winds of January gave way to the crisper air of February, and with it, a subtle shift in the Sterling family dynamic. Arthur, true to his word, became a regular fixture in Leo's life. He'd cleared a section of his vast, climate-controlled home studio, a space Alara hadn't even known existed until recently, and declared it Leo's Corner. It was soon filled with an explosion of primary colors, fantastical creatures sculpted from modeling clay, and surprisingly sophisticated architectural sketches that echoed the city's skyline. Arthur, for his part, seemed to be rediscovering a part of himself long dormant. He wouldn't paint alongside Leo, not yet, but he'd watch, offering quiet guidance on perspective or the way light fell on an object. Sometimes, Alara would find him simply sitting in the quiet of the studio after Leo had left, a faint scent of turpentine clinging to the air, though no new canvases ever appeared. Beatrice, too, was making an effort. Her Saturdays with Leo became sacred. They weren't just trips to museums anymore, they were adventures. They'd explore different neighborhoods, Beatrice pointing out architectural details Alara herself had overlooked, or they'd visit ethnic markets, Leo sketching the vibrant produce and the expressive faces of vendors. Beatrice even volunteered to read to Leo's class at the Lakeside Arts Initiative, her perfectly modulated voice captivating the children with tales of knights and dragons. It was a start. Alara found her own life subtly changing. The check for $50,000 sat untouched in a new savings account, a safety net she still felt uneasy about. But the Sterling name, now reattached to hers in the city's consciousness, opened doors. A small, independent gallery in River North, intrigued by the whispers of the other Sterling artist, offered her a solo show. It wasn't the Sterling collection, and that, perversely, made it easier to accept. Are you sure, Ellie? Genevieve had asked over one of their now regular sisterly coffees. Dad would give you a prime spot in the emerging artists wing in a heartbeat. I know, General, and I appreciate that. But this feels like mine, Alara explained. And besides, she added with a wry smile, I want to make sure some of my Lakeside kids get a look in for that wing. Their work is incredible. Genevieve had smiled. Leave it with me. Mom's already half in love with the initiative. I think a Sterling Family Foundation grant might be in their future. Spring arrived, painting Chicago in brief, glorious bursts of green. The chill between Alara and her parents hadn't entirely vanished, but it was no longer a frozen tundra. There were still awkward silences, moments when the ghosts of old grievances flickered at the edges of conversations. But there was also laughter, particularly when Leo was around, his innocent observations often bridging the gap. One April afternoon, Arthur found Alara in her small Pilsen apartment, sketching furiously. Her upcoming show was weeks away, and the familiar pre-exhibition jitters were setting in. That's powerful, Arthur said, looking over her shoulder at a charcoal drawing of a lone figure huddled against a backdrop of towering, indifferent skyscrapers. It was raw, visceral, and undeniably Alara. It's how I felt for a long time, she admitted quietly. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I put my brushes down because I thought I had to choose. Between art and responsibility. Between passion and providing. It was a false choice. He looked at her then, his gaze direct. Don't make the same mistake I did, Alara. Don't ever let anyone, not even me, tell you your voice isn't worth hearing. The opening of Alara's show, Urban Echoes, was a surprisingly buzzy affair. The small gallery was packed. Julian Croft, the art critic, was there, holding court. Genevieve and William mingled effortlessly. And in a quiet corner, observing everything, stood Arthur and Beatrice Sterling. When a prominent collector, known for his discerning eye, purchased Alara's large central piece, the one Arthur had seen in her studio, for a sum that made Alara's head spin, $15,000, a significant amount for her at this stage, she saw Arthur actually smile. A real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. Later, Beatrice pulled her aside. Your father is very proud of you, Alara, she said, her voice softer than usual. We both are. Anne, I've spoken to the board of the foundation. We're endowing a permanent art program at the Lakeside Arts Initiative. The Leo Sterling Vance program for young artists. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. Mom, thank you. It was the first time she'd called her mom in over 5 years without a knot of anger in her stomach. That summer, the Sterling Collection's Emerging Chicago Artists wing opened. Among the polished works of MFA graduates were vibrant, joyful pieces by several of Alara's students from Lakeside, their names proudly displayed. Leo, beaming, stood beside a small, framed sketch of his, the stoic pigeon from the fire escape, now titled City Watcher. One sweltering August evening, the family gathered at Arthur and Beatrice's Lincoln Park home for an impromptu barbecue, something that would have been unthinkable a year prior. Leo was chasing fireflies on the manicured lawn with William, Genevieve's husband, while Jen and Alara watched, sipping iced tea. Arthur approached Alara, a strange, almost shy expression on his face. I started something. In the studio. Would you care to see? Alara followed him. There, on an easel, was a canvas. It was unmistakably Arthur's style, bold architectural lines, a dramatic interplay of light and shadow, but there was a new warmth, a vibrancy that hadn't been in the old prints of his nocturnes she'd secretly looked up online. It was a cityscape, but instead of cold steel and glass, it depicted the community garden near the Lakeside Arts Initiative, bathed in the golden light of a summer afternoon, children, one of them clearly resembling Leo, playing amongst the flowers. It's not finished, Arthur said, almost apologetically. Dad, Alara said, her voice thick with emotion. It's beautiful. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not just the formidable patriarch or the distant father, but the artist, the fellow traveler who had lost his way and was, painstakingly, finding his way back. The thaw was no longer just a seasonal change in Chicago. It was happening within the walls of the Sterling family, one brushstroke, one shared laugh, one tentative step at a time. The road ahead was still long, the landscape of their relationships still needing careful navigation, but the ice was undeniably breaking. And for Alara, that was more than she could have dared to hope for.